and Janet is the current president of the IVLA. So very visually literate person. I know she has a great presentation in store for you. And at this point, I don't think I need to tell you a lot. I do like to remind people that if you have a cell phone, to please either turn it off or turn it on vibrate so it doesn't interrupt during Janet's presentation. And please, if you have any questions, you don't hesitate to ask. So we have our room steward here. She's happy to help you with anything that you need. And with that, without any further ado, I think I would turn it over to Janet and ask you to all give her a warm welcome for this final session of the conference.
I appreciate your kind welcome, and it's really an honor to close out the program by being in the last session, and I'm especially honored that so many people came because I was thinking that so many folks were gone, but this has been a really terrific conference, and there's been such a diverse topic range, and this is probably a little bit further away from some of the topics that you've been attending at the conference, because I design clothes and I do scholarship on a number of different visual topics, but I'm going to share with you a decades-long research project on how clothes fit, or more importantly, how they don't fit and why. And what's very interesting to me is to be able to put together how we see with how we make judgments about whether clothes fit or not. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you. I'll give you a little bit about my methods. I'm currently working on a documentary on this topic of why clothes don't fit and what we can do about it. And so I'll share with you some of the topics around that. Most of us learn a lot about visual literacy by being in places like the Toledo Museum of Art, where we are able to view art and learn about elements and principles and meaning and methods and all kinds of ways to learn about what we see. This is the canvas that I spend time staring at. I like to spend time in urban environments mostly, where there are a lot of people. And I look at what they wear, and as a designer and maker of clothing, I'm really interested in all the various body shapes that are out there. And so I look at streets, environments, and airports are one of my favorite places to study people, because it's really simple to take photos of people who are wearing clothes. And you know, okay. It's so much easier now that cell phone photos are happening. It was a lot more difficult when I had a real camera. It was obvious. And like this photo that I took of this gentleman, I had my phone. I was standing like right next to him, and he had no idea I was taking his photograph. Now, you'll notice I don't have his identity shared in here, and this is a very, very common misfit problem in the clothing fit of pants. So let's talk about what fit is before we get into what it isn't. It's really just a simple relationship between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. The 2 dimensions are the fabric of your clothing when it's flat. When clothing is produced, patterns are made, and then they're cut out, and it's all in 2 dimensions, and then they're sewn together on the seams, which makes a 3-dimensional form. And there's also, though, the 3-dimensional body that the clothes go on. And when clothing wraps or pulls against the body, then it takes on another characteristic when the body's moving. So it's a pretty complex situation. And how we set standards as to whether something is good fit or bad fit is really a complex problem. Because, well, first of all, there are there's more than 2, but 2 main components. One is the industrial, or how the clothes are actually made. There are standards about standard sizing. I'll go into that in a little bit. But there's also the individual visual preference, and there's the preference of how things feel on our bodies and how we're used to looking at how clothing fits other people and how clothing is styled in magazines and things like that. So how those standards are shaped is really a curious situation for me. Now, here's a very similar situation to the one that we just looked at. And it's really, what I find really sad is that when people look at clothes that fit so poorly as this does, they make judgments about the person. And they'll say, oh, this, you know, like with that guy or this woman, they shouldn't be allowed to wear pants. Well, of course, the guys are always wearing pants, and so you don't hear that as often about men, but you do hear that about women. And to me, I feel that as a clothing designer and a person who works a lot with apparel production folks and technical stylists and whatnot, it really is up to the apparel industry, and we do have the processes to get clothes to fit bodies much better than we do, but we choose not to, and I think that's a really curious situation as well. It has a lot to do with how we've learned to accept things that don't fit well. But every body is deserving of a well-fitted garment to wear that keeps them comfortable. But anyway, I could go on about that. I'm going to go on about how I actually take the photos again. I was at a concert. This was my grandson, who's in the very middle, kind of just his head looking like this. It was a Christmas concert last year, and he plays the saxophone. And you know, a lot of parents are standing around with their cameras, and they're taking pictures of their kids on stage. And of course, I have my cell phone with me, and the director comes on stage. I'm hoping, yeah, you can see this.
Oh.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And I pull out my camera, and my daughter sitting next to me, she goes, "Mom, don't." I'm like, I'm just taking a picture of the kids on the stage. And she goes, "I know exactly what you're doing." So the kids used to help me a lot when I had real cameras, because they would know that I was looking at something I wanted to document, and then they would go, "Oh, Mom, do you want me to stand over here so you can take my picture?" You know, I'm like, "Sure." And so I would look like I was taking her picture and then just grab the one that was next to her. So it really is a whole lot easier now. And this was in an airport. I was just sitting at a bench in the airport and saw this woman. And the first thing I noticed was that her skirt was completely hiked up on her hip. And, you know, then you begin to wonder, is this how she wanted to wear it? I mean, a lot of people choose to wear clothing that's quite tight, but if it's like hanging up someplace, I'm not so sure that that was an intention. I didn't interview her about it, but I have done a lot of interviews on Misfit. Today I'm just going to focus on the visual components. And then there's how things are worn, like the woman on the right. This was just at a Target store, and I walked in and saw her, and I thought, oh man, I don't think you really wanted to have your skin showing like that. I don't know. I don't think she did. But one of the things that we tend to do is because it's difficult to find tailored things that fit our body shapes and the variety of shapes that we come in, we wear things that are either oversized or that are you know, very casual and loose and comfortable. And then we get looks like that. And then the one on the left, it's, okay, let me back up for just a second. One of the things that I used to do when I was in grad school in the 80s, I taught a class called Fitting the Human Subject. And I had students bring in clothes that didn't fit. And then we had a little fashion show. And I brought in a photographer. And that was the beginning of the Misfit photography documentation that I've done. And the reason that I did that is because it's not just, oh, let's look at these clothes that don't fit. It's like, how do you analyze it to know how to correct it? So there's a whole technical side of this that we're not going to cover today, but that if you look at it, then, you know, again, going back to that two-dimensional and three-dimensional thing, if you look at, here's how it looks in 3 dimensions. If I want to get rid of those wrinkles, if I want to have it hang differently from the body, then how do I change the two-dimensional pattern to create that end shape? So there's a lot of analytical to it. And then there's things like this. Now, I'm not a real big fan of underwear showing as a style statement, but I know a lot of people do that. And this one, though, I almost wanted to just go, can you just wear the bra so it fits right? I mean, I don't mind that it's exposed, but what I don't like is she's got stripes. So I don't know, in my mind, I want to have things parallel. So anyway, I see these things all the time. I have lots and lots of examples of this. We're not going to dwell on that. What I want to do is talk about the standards and how we do or do not match those and how we help to shape them. We as viewers and our visual visually articulate way of creating an understanding. But the technical standards of fit have to do with things like grain line. Grain line is the, on a woven fabric, there's the lengthwise grain and the crosswise grain of the fabric, and how that's placed on the body, that's about the grain line. There's ease, and then you're looking at hemlines and garment edges and garment openings and how flat they lay on the body. Or the seam placement, if you've got a seam that runs up and down the side of your garment, is that perpendicular to the floor? There are all kinds of technical standards that a fitting professional in a style development situation is going to look at and make sure that the standards are met. And there are a lot of them and how they should be, right? So there's shoulds around standards. But one of the best ways to identify fit is to look at how things don't fit. And there are visual cues to misfit that most people don't see and most people don't understand. And I'll get into how that happens visually in a little bit. But I'll just go through what some of the visual cues are to misfit. And wrinkles are the biggest ones. You know, if you put something on and you look in the mirror and you go, oh, that's funny, there's a little wrinkle here. Okay, maybe something's goofy. And so wrinkles, and if they're diagonal wrinkles, they point to where the problem is. If they're horizontal, they mean something's too tight. If they're vertical wrinkles, it means something's too loose. Here's, you can see I hope you can see the wrinkles by the pocket that are horizontal wrinkles. That's showing a tightness. Clothing that gaps, like the pocket is gapping, you shouldn't be able to see the lining of the pocket. Clothing that shows your underwear placement, kind of rides up into areas where you probably don't need it. Hemlines not being parallel to the floor. Closures that don't close. Things that are long proportionally, like the jacket, the coat that this woman is wearing comes down to the tops of her fingers as opposed to just below the wrist bone, things like that. And how it gaps open at the center front. And even in shoes. This was in the hotel lobby yesterday.
Oh, no.
And I know, you see this stuff all the time. I don't know, does anyone else notice these things?
I think not quite like you do.
But now that I'm showing these to you, you're going to see them all the time, right? But that was the simple part, now it's getting complicated. Okay, so first of all, standard sizing. You've heard of standard sizing, right? Oh, that's a standard size 10, or that's a standard, I wear a size whatever. Well, in rings, maybe. Rings are pretty standard sizes, and the reason is, it's one linear surface measurement. It's a circumference. Your ring size might change if it's a narrow band or a wider band, just due to the comfort of taking it on and off your finger. But ring sizes are pretty standard. But our bodies are not just teeny little cylinders like that. Our bodies have all kinds of protrusions and angles and shapes. So that becomes more difficult. I don't expect for you to read all of this, but what I am going to tell you is this is a sizing chart from a company that sells clothing by a number of different brands. And what's interesting about this chart is it shows you what the sizes are for the different brands. The brands are listed on the left, and then the sizes running, this is the extra small, small, medium, and large. You can look and find your own particular body measurements, and in one brand you might be a large, and in another brand you might be a small. Now this is nothing new, because I'm sure that you found that just buying clothes, right? So the reality of the sizing system is that it's not standard. There is a voluntary product standard, though, about sizing that nobody pays attention to anymore. And there are new sizing systems that are being developed that are fraught with problems. The standard sizing that we use in the United States of America was developed in 1939 with 2,000 women who were in the military, and they were in their 20s. And all the sizing since then has been extrapolated from those dimensions. In 1970, the early 70s, there was an adjustment made to the sizing in women's sizing. And now it's a myth, it's a mess. Okay, but getting the right size is easy. All you have to do is know how to measure yourself correctly And let me tell you, when you measure yourself, you never ever stand like that. Like the woman, yeah, take my measurements. So, like, really? You're gonna teach people how to take their measurements? And then tell them incorrect things, like, your natural waist is at the smallest point between the bottom rib and the hip bone. It's not. It's not. For women, if you go side to side, it's where that bend is. You start there. You start there. But some people have this much space, and some people have this much space between the bottom of the rib cage. I bought a pair of jeans recently that was a high-rise jeans, which I don't know why I did it. I'm sorry I did. And I don't have a lot of space between my pelvic bone and my rib cage. And it's really, it kind of folds out. It's ridiculous. I should never have done that. But anyway, the point is that you take the measurement where you wear your pants. And it used to be that we always said for men, that's where you take the measurement. For women, that's the same now because the way that pants are worn varies so much. So it's really difficult to give measurement instructions like this. And then this is the funniest one. On the hip for the women, to measure around the widest part of your hips, including the buttocks. Okay, so the widest part of your hips. Okay, I'm going to measure around that, including my seat. Well, how would you do that without including your seat? I mean, that's kind of silly. But when you take a hip measurement, it should be at the fullest part of how far the seat protrudes, no matter how high or low it is. And that's a measurement that's parallel to the floor. So the technical side of getting fit right is really messed up. And not only that, the reason that it's messed up, well, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that we don't teach this in school any longer. We don't. People who do fashion merchandising, people who do apparel design, get a little bit of fit in a pattern making class if they take it. So it's no wonder that the people that we rely on to get it right get it wrong. They're not trained any longer in the way that we used to. Okay, so ease is our savior. Ease is that pattern shape where you add extra dimension, or sometimes less if it's negative ease, in order to create the kind of fit that you want. This is the fudge factor. This is where if you need a little bit extra space, well, we'll take it out of the ease. Maybe the designer intended it to be big and fluffy, but you wear it and your body feels so big and fluffy and it still fits. Okay, fine. It may not be like they wanted it to, but it still fits. So we do a lot with ease, and we do a lot with ease and style. It's like, okay, so how do we know? These are just, I have a couple examples here. It'll say, all right, so there's the straight leg or the relaxed fit or the snug fit or for the chubby people, or, really, that's a term that's been used, especially for children's, husky, chubby, horrible. But anyway, so that's really a way that fit has been adjusted because we don't get it right. But this one I think is really hilarious. See how it says the waist and the length? Men don't seem to mind wearing pants like that. It'll say 32 waist, 32 length, whatever. I don't see women wearing pants that say what their waist sizes are. I don't know. So there are a lot of places that are doing a lot of wonderful research on clothing fit. At the University of Minnesota, I was on sabbatical last spring semester, and I did a short visiting professorship and worked at the Human Dimensioning Lab here at the University of Minnesota, and it was wonderful. They have a 3D body scanning, and because they're able to capture things like shape and angles, the resulting research and sizing that can come from that is great. So, laser measuring, three-dimensional printing has been around for a while. I was really, really excited when it first came out in the mid-'80s. It was like, wow, we're going to get fit right. This is so cool. But you know what they started to do with it? I was so frustrated. They had all this information, tons of data to get it right. And instead they extrapolated linear surface measurements, bust, waist, hip, and turned it into the old sizing system. Now I'm making it sound worse than it is, but it's really bad. So I say that because there are companies who are doing really cool things with data like this, but it's not the big standard sizing savior that I was hoping it to be. Okay, so within the visual context of how we use clothing and what the consequences are of things, our own perception of clothing and how we set our standards, it's kind of an interesting situation as well. One is that we don't recognize, as I mentioned, visual cues to misfit, although now that you've seen some of these, you'll start seeing them all the time.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Okay, and we're also used to things just being good enough. Like, okay, yeah, no, hey, it's good enough. I like it. And I gave a presentation on technical fit one time, and this guy said, why does this matter? Why does it matter? I mean, my stuff fits good enough. Like, yeah, you can move in it, but is it really, does it make you feel great? You know, that's the thing. Yes?
Are Europeans more conscious of good fit than Americans? It seems when I travel, I see people in other countries that their clothes seem to fit them better.
Well, let's talk about that for sure, because there are, they have a different sizing system.
They're thinner.
They have a different sizing system and they have a different range of body shapes.
Mhm.
So, and they're more based on a couture system as a basis. We, in America, started with ready-to-wear. So, okay, and this is the one that makes me the most sad, is that we blame our bodies and not our clothes. It'll be like, my pants don't fit because my legs are too long. We don't say my pants don't fit because the inseam isn't long enough for my body, right? We blame our bodies. I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, I'm too hunched over, I'm too whatever. So we've internalized really negative self-perceptions of our bodies. And we've learned how to adapt. Let's just fix it. I'll take it to a tailor. I interviewed a woman for the video who is a teeny little petite woman who has a proportion between her waist and her hips is more than standard. So every pant she buys, she takes to a tailor and it costs $52. That's not okay. And then people say, well, I wouldn't want to spend more in order to have the sizing right. Well, I don't know. I'd probably pay a little bit more. Okay, so the context that we see things in assists in how we attach meaning to it. What I mean by that in this situation is when we see things that don't really fit well, but nobody seems to do anything about it, then we kind of adjust our sense of what fits well, and we go, oh, it's probably fine. Does that make sense? You'll see more about this in a minute. So, I mean, I think all of us as visually literate and visually inquisitive people understand that the context shapes how things mean, right? Okay. For example, in advertising, ideals. The ideals of body image, well, there's all kinds of scholarship on what that does to self-image. But what it does to us in terms of understanding fit and sizing and understanding our standards of how things should fit is that we see that in magazines and then we see stuff on the street that's just really different shapes. I mean, shapes are different. You know, we talk about bust and waist and hips and how they're arranged. And then on television, I see this all the time. And we think that people who are on TV, you know, they're styled. There's somebody styling them. We're spending money, as the stations do, to make sure people look right. So this must be right. So we get this idea of this is right, but then, I don't know, can you see the problem in where her seam fits on her shoulder?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and hopefully you can see this one. See how the dart points up to here on her blouse?
Oh, yes.
The dart's supposed to point to the apex of the bust. And this one was from the local Toledo.
Oh, yeah. I have to watch that all the time.
Do you? I'm so
Yes.
sorry.
I know.
I took so many photos of her.
Poor dear.
And the thing of it is, she's an attractive person. And whether she is ugly, it doesn't matter. She deserves to wear clothes that fit her body shape.
I don't think these TV people make much, though. I mean, I don't think they have the stylists that, not in this market anyways.
Well, this next guy has money. Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
HGTV Property Brothers. I don't know. Does this rest correctly at the base of his head? No. But we go, hey, he's a hot guy. He's on TV. He's wearing clothes that fit. not.
Even though it looks like
So this is what's influencing our ideas of what's good fit.
Hmm.
And then merchandising your clothing. How is this supposed to fit? On the mannequins, they're all nice and snug because they pinch them up in the back.
Mhm.
Every time I see these in a store, I just want to go and undo them.
I think you should.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, I mean, you sell clothes because the designer, or I like to design clothes too, so I want it to be exactly how I've drawn it.
Right.
And so when I construct it, why would I pinch it, you know, to be something different than what it actually is? Because I've actually had dresses that when I conformed to myself, my dress was shaped a certain way that's not on the rack, but it wouldn't have looked nice on the hanger. So I know why they don't.
So there's a disconnect in communication between the designer and the person who's putting it out there visually for the visual merchandising team.
That's not actually the shirt. I mean, that's not, if you do that shirt, the outline of the shirt, we wouldn't buy it.
Exactly. But then, what about the way that things are styled in magazines? I don't think sports bras are supposed to fit this way. They're not, believe me. And then things can be quite subtle. Like, all right, so if we just put something in a knit, then maybe it'll stretch to fit. But look at how there's that parallel line from shoulder to shoulder, or even worse here.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. And this one is really recent. This is Coldwater Creek. I understand they're going out of business.
They did.
Are they gone now?
Yeah.
Good, because actually when, sorry, hello. Well, here's the thing. Okay, so I'm like, the first time I saw this one, the first thing I saw was that the darts weren't right.
Yeah.
See the dart on the, how it's like up above her breast. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I actually went to Coldwater Creek store. This was last spring in Minnesota when I was there on that visiting professorship. And they had one at the Mall of America. And they had this exact same advertising spread in the window. And they had the shirts there. Bonus. So I went into the store and I said, who's in charge of the display? They're like, oh, I don't know. You know? So I said, well, is there anyone here I can talk with about how this shirt fits? Oh, any of us, you know. So I said, okay, well, let's get a few of us around. So they weren't busy at all. So I talked with them and I pointed it out to them. And I held up this shirt and I held up this shirt and I said, see how this one's like 3 inches lower and this one's like, huh? I mean, they really, I think they cared about it, but I was talking a different language completely. So I'm really sad that their business didn't go well, but hey, deal with your consumers and make them feel good about who they are.
So
Okay.
even when you would actually put one on, it would look like that, not just this model.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so this, I don't know, this is in a magazine, it's in a catalog. And in catalogs, you're supposed to look at how things are supposed to fit, right? So look at how the shoulder, on the top of her shoulder, how it's wrinkling up there. And then look at over here, this looks like one of the newscasters, doesn't it? The upper arm. But let's just say one size fits all.
Yeah.
or one size fits most. And then in magazines, this cracks me up. Let's just fix your figure. And if you dress correctly, then your figure can be fixed. Like there's something wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with our bodies. Yeah, some of us want to be more in shape. Some of us want to be stronger. Some of us want to get rid of some of the weight we're carrying. Basically, we want to be healthy, right? We want to be healthy and we want to feel good about who we are and we want to enjoy being out in the world and have a sense of well-being. Do we need to fix our figures through style? I think we need to fix the way clothing fits. But then that's just me. Okay, so then we label shapes. Okay, if you're an apple or a pear or a banana, whatever. We tell people how things should fit, yes, no, and I can tell lots of things wrong with the yes. We style things so that fashion you can see how things are supposed to fit. And then we wreck everything with Photoshop. And pretend that this is how these clothes actually fit somebody. Believe me, they don't. The stripe, notice the stripe on her shirt? It's not showing any curve that's going to the back. That was manipulated. Her pants are manipulated. This one was totally smoothed out. So there are a lot of examples of where we hope to get it right, and what it does is it changes our perception of how things should be. Because we trust these sources, right? Don't we? Trust the magazines and the newscasters and the stylists, we trust them. But here is the next thing that makes it complicated. What does attractive mean? and who gets to decide? That's my favorite. Okay, we're going to go into here's a little test for you. Okay. And a couple of you have been in a presentation before where I gave this, so don't give the answer. All right, so read this sentence inside the box. Just read through it one time. And then go back through and count, not aloud, but count the number of F's that are inside the rectangle one time. Count the number of F's. Okay, how many got 3? How many got 4? 5? 6? There are 6 F's. Which ones did you miss?
The grade you give it first grade?
What? Finished files, yeah, and there's 3 ofs.
Oh.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Why do you think you missed them?
Because you're reading to yourself and you don't really ask words.
What?
You don't consider them as words.
Yeah, they're kind of not the important words, right? And so this is what happens when we look at things so often and they're not the thing that grab our attention, they become invisible. We do this in our perception of daily life all the time. It's a very active process, perception is.
Or actually, you know, what I was trying to do was get the concept when I read it.
Okay, so
'Cause
that got
I
in the
was trying
way.
to remember that.
Because I was going to test you on that.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was focused on.
Right, yeah, yeah. Okay, so here, do you see the arrow?
Yes.
Okay, there's an arrow between the E and the X, it's the negative space, the white space. And now that you've all seen it, and some of you have seen it before, you will never not see it. But if you hadn't seen it until now, you never saw it, you never thought about it, right? So awareness has a lot to do with our perception as well. So if we're aware that something's wrong, just like I've really messed with you by showing you all those clothes that didn't fit, you're going to be aware of that now. Okay, you know how in most of the presentations and a lot of the experiences in such a wonderful museum of this focus on amazing paintings? I teach visual literacy by looking at everyday trash. Okay. In a class that I teach on visual literacy, it's called Seeing and Being. It's a class I have 80 students, I'm teaching it this semester. And they learn about how we make sense of things that we see in the world. We spend 20 minutes on this one slide. And I ask them to tell me about the neighborhood, what city it's in, what the income level is, who walks up and down the street, what the stores are that are on the street. Can anyone just guess where this is? It could be in a lot of different places. It's an older image now. It's one of my favorite trash images, so I still use it. And notice how there's a, what does it tell you that there's a trash can across the street that's empty? Well, there probably aren't the same hangouts on that side of the street, right? So visual information and visual literacy can be learned anywhere. It can be learned in clothes that don't fit. It can be learned in trash bins. But here's a very interesting and important model that helps us understand how we see and make meaning of the world. I'm going to walk you through this one. Nicer is a cognitive psychologist who wrote Cognition and Reality. He passed away a few years ago now. He was working at Cornell University. But he's done a lot of work with memory, cognition, and perception. He's probably my favorite in terms of whose thoughts I go to understand how we create a sense of knowledge about what we see. And here's why. It's in this model here. What he's explaining in this map is how we actively search for what we see. Now, at the top of this, I'll see if I can. Is it okay? Hey, video guys, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
We can still see you.
I'm moving. Okay.
Oh, good.
We have a wide shot of the front of the room.
Oh, okay.
We can still see you.
Okay, so here's the thing. This represents the actual world, or all the potential information that we're looking at out there, everything. We call that the visual world. There's a visual field of what we're actually seeing, but this is the visual world, everything out here. It's the actual present environment that's available, that has the available information in it that we look at. Over here, this is our perceptual exploration. This is our activity of looking, okay? Over here is what we hold in our mind in terms of a schema or a model of what we see. So here's how this works together. The actual environment modifies our memory of, or our understanding of, or what we hold in our mind of what that thing is. For example, a chair. I have something in my mind like what a chair looks like. Can you think of a chair in your head? How many legs are on it? 4? Did anyone think of a chair that was like overstuffed, or thought of a chair the kind you're sitting on now? There are lots of possible chairs in the world, but when you actually look at a chair, let's say you look at a chair with 3 legs, that's going to change your thinking about what chairs could be, right? Expands it a bit. So what we actually see modifies what we hold in our head for that category, for that thing, for our understanding. That, what we hold in our head, this is the important piece, directs what we're going to look at. If we think the F's are important, right, then we're going to see them. If we dismiss things as being not necessary, then we're not going to be seeking those things out. So what we have in our head directs our perceptual exploration, and then we see what's in the environment based on what we're looking for, right? So this is a pretty important model for understanding how we shape our preferences to things. We tend to like things or prefer things that we're familiar with. We see something new, we go, wow, that's really cool, then that's going to shape what we think of accepting, right? And then what we accept is going to direct what we're going to look at. For example, let's go back to clothes, for example. Forget about fit for a minute. For clothes, like, I'm kind of in this rut where I like black a lot, and I like kind of muted colors. So if I go into a shop, I probably will skip the racks that have a lot of yellows in them, right? Now sometimes I might go, wow, that's really cool. I saw somebody wear something on the street that was yellow, so then maybe I'll go and look for that. But for the most part, I have blinders on. Now, I'm making a bad example because as a designer, I'm supposed to keep those blinders off of you, wear everything right, but still, that's how we kind of do things. We tend to see things that we already find acceptable. And we quickly judge things that we don't find acceptable. That's another whole day. But things that we see. Which image do you think is a healthier woman? Yeah, the one on the right. Because the one on the left, it's exactly the same person, I just changed it in Photoshop, but the one on the left has an angle where the waistline isn't fitting correctly, and the reason it's not fitting correctly is because her back is rounded, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that it's got an angle there is emphasizing that her back is rounded, and then you look at that, and when you see people who are have backs that are rounded like that, you think, oh, that person's got something perhaps not right. So then, but this goes back to the thing about standards. I mean, what if we were to make clothes that fit everybody and they fit the shape that they have, then you wouldn't be making that same judgment. Maybe you would, you find other ways to do that, but anyway. And then what about style preferences? Remember in the early 90s when pants got big on guys? Like really big. And there was such an outrage in the fashion press about that. How can they walk? But after a while, it's like, you know, to have them tight, I don't know, then that's another whole thing. But we get used to things after a while. It wasn't so shocking after we saw them for a long time. And I don't know, this one to me is a little bit more shocking, but again, preference. I'm not there styling them. They're styling themselves. They have a different way of wanting something to fit than I would wear. So does she. So whether something's tight or loose or where it fits on the body is a representation of how that person chooses to style their clothes, right? That changes over time with fashion. That's another whole topic of how fashion moves over time and how our preferences related to fashion move over time. I'm trying to stay focused just on how we develop our preferences related to how something fits, but fashion is a huge part of it. This is back in the early 90s, and I know that because the pager thing. Remember the pagers?
Oh.
But I interviewed this guy. We talked for a long time about how, and he took off his belt and he showed me where he hung it and how he tightened it. And I was doing some work at the time with gang investigators. I was looking at doing a research project on visual style and violent intent. And I did a lot of work with street gangs and worked with the kids who were in the gangs and with the cops who were trying to understand them. And it was kind of funny because the cops told me, they go, well, we don't really worry about the kids that are hanging their pants down like that because we know they're not the ones with the drugs because they can't run very fast. But it kind of turned into a style. I know, I'm like, wow. I have so many photos of this. And then this is just a little bit. Yeah. This is another one of those situations where one of my daughters was with me. Mom, don't. But the reality is that the shapes of clothes and the shapes of our bodies do not align. We've adjusted the way that we prefer clothes based on what's available. Again, it's a combination of what's available, the standards that the industry sets, and our standards of preference and what we're willing to tolerate. What I've been finding in the really smart people I've been talking with about the ones who actually have impact on the research that's going to bring about change is that the one factor that needs to be factored in is the angles and shapes of the body. We have access to that information now. It's a matter of putting that into a sizing system that industry will actually develop. Well, there are a lot of possible outcomes, but it's the shape, it's the angle of the shoulder, it's how far the seat protrudes, it's the angle of, I think the hardest one is the one that I'm showing you right now because a lot of people, a lot of women especially, are rounder in their torso and in the bust area. And so what happens is the designer who's making clothes for that, they're going to make the clothes to fit the fullest part of the body, and then they grade it. Pattern grading is where you start with a size 8, size 6, whatever, and then you grade that up by incremental expansions to whatever the top of the range is, 22 maybe, and then it grades down to, I don't know, -4, I don't know, 0. But there's not enough compensation made for the fact that we can grow our body out this way or in this way, but our shoulders kind of stay the same, right? So this is why there's a lot of problem in fit, like the women on the Toledo news station. That's the problem. That's the problem with this woman. This is way off her shoulder. But it has to be that large in order for it to get around. You can see it's kind of tight underneath her, the back of her arm. Lots of work needs to be done. It's pretty simple to notice, this was in an elevator at a conference, to notice clothes that don't fit, and I just feel so badly because it's like, I mean, you know, she was a very attractive woman. You know that she put some content into her mind about what her preferences were, but this is what she had access to, and this is how her clothes fit. And I don't think she wanted it to fit like that on the underarm. I don't think she thought that was the style she was going for. But she never saw the slide presentation. So, this is my last slide, and this is what I want to leave you with in terms of visual preference and standards. As designers, as visually literate people who are responsible for putting products out into the world, we need to focus on the user. We talk a lot about user interface, user interactivity in terms of design and web design. We need to do a lot more about that within clothing design. We need to start with who the user is and address their needs in the technical ways that we can, in the stylistic ways that we can. If we understand what their fit preferences are, I don't think that the designers are the ever knowledgeable person on how something should fit. There are standards that are technical standards, but style standards, we need to listen to what people really want, how they want the. I worked in 1985 with a company that was doing, it was a precursor to a company that actually 3M took over for a while, but it was an artificial intelligence crew from Silicon Valley that came to Minnesota where I was in grad school, and they wanted to know how they could do pattern adjustments in the computer if they had somebody's actual measurements, how they could make patterns that fit them. They thought, oh, that should be simple. You know, it's linear surface measurements, it's shapes of patterns. I spent a day with them showing how to draft a pair of pants that fit different bodies. What really threw them and why they quit the project is when I said, well, you put a ½ inch ease in the waist of the pant, but not everybody likes a ½ inch. Some people like less, some people like more. Well, how do you know? Well, they have to feel what it fits like and what they're used to. That was too much. You put in the person's preference at that point in time, and there were other reasons why they didn't go very far with that work. But anyway, we need to figure out ways to address the bodies that we have. I shared some of the work I was doing on my video with a young kid in my daughter's neighborhood, young kid like he was 19 or so. And he said, well, why would you want clothes to fit people who are overweight? I'm like, are you kidding me? You're asking me this question? Seriously, why would you say that? Well, they should just lose weight and then clothes would fit. I said, do you shop at, what is that? Abercrombie. Yeah. And he said, well, he said, you're encouraging people to keep their body shapes wrong. If you make clothes to fit them. I just was stunned. I couldn't even go further with the conversation because I didn't understand how someone could think like that.
But that's what we're shown with all the Photoshop everything.
Yeah, I know, but the point is he was so blatant about it's not okay to make clothes for somebody who's in that shape because that means you're encouraging them to be in bad shape. Anyway, so there's lots of different ways of thinking about it, but I would encourage all of us as we're making our own choices about how things fit, as we're evaluating how things fit, as we set our own personal standards we think about our visual perceptual processes that create these standards over time, to think about a process of designing for and creating products for the actual user, and not something mythical that then we shove and try to get them to fit into. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
The other thing is that has an awful lot to do with sustainability and fashion, which is another topic that I do scholarship on, and I just finished a few weeks ago the second edition on this book on sustainable fashion. The first one came out in 2008. I co-authored with Connie Ulasowicz from San Francisco. And we had a conversation with several scholars and writers on different topics of sustainability and fashion. There's several chapters and lots of perspectives in there. But the thing is, how does fit relate to this? Think about it if we got it right. There probably wouldn't be a Marshalls anymore.
Right.
You know? There probably wouldn't be all this extra stuff that shows up on sale racks because nobody will buy them. There probably wouldn't be a lot of waste in the system if we could get it right. If you could buy clothes that really fit you well, you'd probably wear them. Do you know in the average amount of clothes that people actually wear in their closet? What's the percentage you think of in your own closet? 10%, you're the closest. Yeah, of the amount of the. So there's a new chapter in this sustainable fashion book that's going to be out next fall, actually. There's a new chapter written by a woman, her name's Lucy Dunn. She's probably one of the smartest people I know. She does work on wearable technology, and she used to really work on, like cool things like putting sensors in shoulder pads, so if you went like this, then it would remind you to stand up straight, stuff like that. And she's doing some really interesting work with, do you know serger? Do you know an overlock stitch in your clothes? It's like this. It's that stitching that goes over a seam. She's putting electronics in those. And now her next thing is she's writing apps to make your clothes do stuff.
Like expand.
Well, she's trying to find out, yeah, I know, she's trying to find out, like, if you could have an app for your clothes, what would you want, And she did a big study on that, and she said you would not believe how many people said they'd want it to make coffee for her. But anyway, so, yeah. So I got Lucy to write a chapter on technology and sustainability, thinking that she was going to write about all these cool gizmos and things that she's been doing. But no, she wrote the most amazing chapter, and it's all about how do we work with consumers so that we can identify what their needs are. We can use the technology to identify what consumer need is so that we can design a more targeted and less wasteful clothing system.
But how is the fashion industry going to go for that? Because of the things you just said.
Well, here's the thing. That's a huge, huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
But we are people who buy clothes with our dollars, and we can choose what we spend our money on, right? Now, I'm sure that several of you in this room have gone into H&M or Forever 21 and bought clothes that you've worn a few times and then you throw out. I do that sometimes, but hardly ever, because whenever I walk in there, I'm like, look at this junk and look at this stuff. So I tell my students, stop making garbage. Just don't do it anymore. Just don't. Well, I'm going to be working for a company and they're going to want to make, no, then don't work for that company. Take a stand. I mean, seriously, if we were making cars that kill people, would we do it anymore? No, we would say, no, you can't make that car, you have to make these. Then why is it okay for us to make clothes that destroy the planet or that make people feel horrible, and that's okay? No, it's not okay. We have choices. And that's another lecture. I'm sorry, I'm going off on this other tangent. My point is that clothing fit and sustainability have a link. And I think if we get it right, we're going to find that our closets are full of clothes that we want to wear, right? Not clothes that, I mean, I have a lot of clothes in my closet right now that are just a little too small. Like maybe a size or two, but still. I'm thinking I'm not going to get rid of them because I'm going to be that size again, right?
Now you're doing what you're not supposed to do.
I know, but the point is, there's a lot of reasons why we keep the clothes that we have, not just fit and sizing. There's all kinds of reasons for it. But fit is a huge part of it, and if we get it right, then we're going to be much happier. But the cool thing is that if we understand how visual literacy connects to how we set our preferences individually as well as people who put products in the world, then we get it right for individuals, for society, for the planet, etc. I think it's big. Thank you for